Hi, I'm Eva Pilgrim. Thanks for streaming with us. Another day of testimony in the Sean Diddy Combs trial, and we have to warn you, some of what you will hear during this program may be disturbing. Combs' ex-girlfriend, who goes by the pseudonym Jane, returned to the stand for her second day of cross-examination. The defense showing Jane several messages of hers appearing to initiate sexual conversation. One message said, "What are you doing, baby? Horny for me." Jane also testified that she would buy matching shorts for Combs and the escorts to wear during hotel nights, as well as erection pills. And when asked about her birthday, Jane telling jurors that she was made to have sex with 3 escorts, testifying, quote, "I'm given my gift, I'm taking a pill, and awaiting an entertainer." Combs has pleaded not guilty to all charges. If convicted, he faces the possibility of life in prison. And coming up, we'll get into the rap rivalries that have come into focus throughout this trial. Let's get right to the federal courthouse, though, in Manhattan, where this trial is taking place. ABC News chief investigative correspondent Aaron Katersky is there. And Aaron, court actually started a little later than usual today. What did we learn?
It did, and that was to accommodate the judge. But Eva, I think today really put into focus the tension that the defense is trying to show between coercion and consent. Because the defense brought Jane back to some of her testimony on direct examination when she said she felt used by Sean Combs or manipulated by Sean Combs, or when she felt disgusted or repulsed. And the jury showed her text messages after some of those episodes where she talked about how much she loved Sean Combs and loved the sexual chemistry between them, and other messages where she was arranging for some of the male escorts that she previously felt like she couldn't say no to. There was Jane being an active participant in some of the hotel nights, as she called them. And that tension, I think, lasted throughout the day's cross-examination, which was at times, Eva, a bit disjointed. Instead of long sequences of text messages the way Jane has been made to read on prior days, Tenny Garagos, the defense attorney, jumped around a bit, and it had the effect of failing to establish maybe a consistent narrative.
Jane pushed back at some point a bit about the defense's questioning again today. What was she being asked about? Any questions that seemed to surprise her?
Yesterday was about luxury handbags. Today was about high-end restaurants. And the defense had showed some restaurants that Jane suggested Combs take her to for her birthday. And she said this was because he had her holed up in a hotel in Miami, the Nobu Hotel in Miami Beach. Very nice. But it had a restaurant, and she was complaining that Combs never really took her out. And she suggested, what about Poppy's Steakhouse? What about Carbone? And Tenny Garagos asked her, Poppy's Steakhouse, a very nice high-end restaurant, isn't it? And Jane looked at her and said, I wouldn't know.
You mentioned this. Much of the day was spent reading these text exchanges. Just talk us through some more of what was in those texts.
Many of them expressed her love for Sean Combs, expressed these really intense feelings for Sean Combs, the sexual energy that she felt, sometimes talking about hotel nights with male escorts that they particularly enjoyed together. And there were other messages where she actually relented and said she didn't want to have a hotel night for whatever reason. And in a few of the messages, the jury saw Sean Combs obliged. And the defense even pointed out this stretch of about 2 months in their relationship in the middle of 2023 when Jane testified they were together but did not have a hotel night with male escorts.
The defense at one point played a video for the jury today. What did that show?
It wasn't what it showed, it was what we all heard. And this apparently occurred when Jane was feeling depressed about the relationship and Sean Combs ended up making her feel better. Jane took a video with her phone that the jury could see. The rest of us could only hear it, and it was a bunch of like kissy face sounds from Sean Combs trying to comfort her and saying that they have to lift each other up, perhaps trying to show Combs in a kinder, gentler light than prosecutors have portrayed him as a sex trafficker and someone who led a criminal enterprise.
Aaron Kotursky for us there at the federal courthouse. Thank you, Aaron. Let's dig deeper into Jane's testimony. ABC News legal contributor Brian Buckmeyer joins me now. I'm curious, what stood out to you today?
So as Aaron pointed out, we saw a lot more text messages. In fact, I think the bedrock of the cross-examination from Tenny Garagos to Jane is just going over these text messages. But what stood out to me is some of the order of these text messages and what Tenny Garagos was trying to point out. Specifically about one situation where Jane had said that there was this hotel night on her birthday. After leaving the hotel night on her birthday, she said something to the effect of, just wanted to say I love and appreciated every detail you put together for my birthday. A few days or weeks later, she sees Sean Combs with another woman, and that's when another text message comes out, and she becomes very frustrated with what happened on her birthday, very angry, saying that she was used. Tenny Garagos tried to make that seem as if you're not frustrated and feeling used about the hotel night on your birthday, you're feeling frustrated and used because you saw another woman with Sean Combs after the fact, trying to plant the seeds of jealousy in this case.
At the start of the day, there was an issue with a juror. What was that? What happened today?
So the AUSA, Comey, came out and said that they have information that one of the jurors, a black male from the Bronx, lacked candor. And that's not necessarily lying or omitting information, but it's giving just enough information to kind of get by while omitting some very specific facts. And the judge says we're going to address that later. The defense pushed back and said this was a thinly veiled attack of trying to take out another black juror on the jury. And if the person is taken out, don't worry, it's not going to be a mistrial. More likely than not, you just take one of the alternates, they replace that individual, and you continue on with the case.
Aaron mentioned this heated exchange that happened on the stand today with Jane and the defense, talking about her birthday plans in these fancy restaurants. Talk us through what happened here.
Yeah, so Nobu, at least from my understanding, is still a very fancy restaurant. But don't forget, Nobu is also attached to a hotel. And I think the idea here, the argument from the government and Jane, is that Sean Combs kept her inside of his hotel, didn't want her to go out or to be seen because, according to the government, she is being trafficked. But the defense instead kind of posited this other idea by asking about Poppy Steak and Carbone and saying that you wanted to go to these other places. You wanted to be shown off. You wanted to travel outside of the home and be shown with Sean Combs. And we have seen pictures of them outside of hotels as well. And the pushback here was that you were jealous that you weren't going to other places. This wasn't about hotel nights, but this is about your jealousy and your frustration. Of course, we saw it play out of, Poppy Steak is a good restaurant in Miami, and Jane saying, I wouldn't know.
We heard about the handbags yesterday. Today, the defense attorney pointed out that Jane had been given this nice necklace for her birthday. What are they trying to do here?
So the idea is to try to show that she is kind of adorned with these great luxury items, whether it be jewelry or bags or going out to restaurants. But the issue seems to come up, as according to the defense is arguing, when she becomes jealous. Don't forget, the opening statement here for the defense is that this is about jealousy and lovers who are with Sean Combs consensually and then get mad after the fact, after hearing them he's with other women in this polyamorous relationship. But she did come and say this: I was given a gift, I'm take a pill, and I'm waiting an entertainer. One thing that Tenny Garagos pointed out is that she took a pill, then messaged one of the entertainers for 24 hours afterwards. And so the idea being here that that pill would have affected you during that hotel night. This is just something that you do with Sean Combs, taking pills.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about text messages because there was a lot of text messages shown in court today. Walk us through some of these exchanges.
So this is one that I mentioned earlier that really stood out to me. I just wanted to say I loved and appreciated every detail you put together for my birthday. Don't forget, this birthday is where Jane also says that she had a hotel night with 3 different men for hours on end. And so the defense is saying, okay, you had this experience. Why would you put this here? And for Jane, she was saying she's only talking specifically to the time that she had with Sean, not talking about the time she had with the other men, making that difference, but not articulating that here. And the defense is making the argument of, well, how do we know that? What you're saying shows one thing, and what you're saying on the stand says another thing. I can guarantee that the defense is going to make the argument of, you can't trust Jane because what she says one day changes on the next. Why would you trust what she says on the stand here today? And the text message, I think that's what the defense is trying to argue, that she's portraying one image, and then on the stand, she's portraying another.
Brian Buckmeyer, thank you so much for being with us. We have heard allegations of domestic violence repeatedly during this trial, and his lawyers say Sean Combs admits there was domestic violence in some of his relationships, but say he wasn't involved in any sex trafficking. Now, Combs has denied all charges, but with all the talk of domestic violence, we wanted to bring in an expert, Beverly Gooden, and Beverly is not involved in this case, but she advocates against domestic violence and has even written a book on why people sometimes stay in abusive relationships. Beverly, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
We've heard a lot about Jane's testimony over the last several days, and at one point she said she's still in love with Sean Combs. When you hear that, what do you think of that?
You know, people think abusive relationships are all violence all the time, but that's not how it works. She was still in love with him because it wasn't all bad. There were a lot of moments that felt real and felt beautiful. They laughed, they made memories, they built a life together. And so when things get bad, victims often stay hoping they can get back to that version of them. And so survivors might miss the non-violent version of that person, but not the violent version of that person. And that back and forth can create something called a trauma bond. And it's when the person that's hurting you is also the one that you desire, the person who's comforting you. And that makes it really hard to break away.
Now, I want to just step back a moment here. Domestic violence is something that can happen to both men and women. For people watching, how would you define an abusive relationship?
Yeah, an abusive relationship is one that is about power and control. One partner is trying to maintain control over another partner, and they can do that via coercion. They can do that via physical violence, emotional violence, and psychological violence. But the pattern of control is what makes a relationship abusive.
And in this trial, we've seen, and we were talking about it today, we've seen messages that appear to show Jane, who's one of the alleged victims, initiating sex with Combs and with others. And there are people who are wondering, how can you be a victim of an event that you initiated?
Yeah, the thing about it is that abuse is not happening at all times. If you are in love with someone, you want to be physical with them most of the time. And so she has those desires just like everyone else. Victims aren't supernatural, superhuman people. They have desires, they have feelings, they have love, they have attraction. And so if she is someone who is initiating a sexual relationship with someone else, that doesn't make it okay for her to be abused, because kink is not abuse. Kink involves enthusiastic consent from both parties. If there is not that enthusiastic consent, even once the sex has started, then you've gone into a different territory.
And I'm curious, what is it like for women to testify in public about cases like this?
Yeah, testifying in court is so brave, but it can feel like reliving that trauma all over again. You're telling your story, some of the worst moments of your life, out loud in front of strangers, and often while the person who hurt you is staring you down, as we've seen him do in court. It's terrifying and it's exposing. And I think of the fact that the courtroom isn't built for healing. It's not a healing place. The defense will question everything: why you went back, why you stayed, why you didn't tell someone. Even if you know your own truth, it can feel like you're the one on trial. And so that pressure, I think, to be perfectly calm, perfectly consistent, believable, is really overwhelming, and it can re-traumatize even the strongest survivor.
Beverly Gooden, thank you so much for joining us today. Still ahead, how did the defense do today? Should the prosecution be concerned? Our legal team breaks it down for you next. Welcome back. Thanks for streaming with us. Diddy's ex-girlfriend Jane facing a second day of cross-examination today by the defense. To break down the legal strategies we saw today, Brian Buckmeyer is back with us as the defense. Bernardo Villalona analyzing the prosecution. The defense, we got to talk about kind of how the day went. They had Jane reading a lot of text messages. I mean, hours and hours of reading these text messages. Brian, what was the point of all this?
So I think stylistically, maybe not the greatest way to do it, but I think yes, I know. I'm trying to be polite and nice here. But I think the ultimate goal here is to show that in close in time to these events, this is what she was thinking, this is what she was portraying, this is what Sean Combs heard. And now she's going to be on the stand, and we saw her on direct examination as well as cross-examination, trying to give color as to the explanation as, well, this is why I said it, or I'm hiding this idea, or I'm hiding this thought. I really felt this even though I said that. And I think ultimately it's going to come up to the jury to see, okay, do I believe her? Do I not believe her? And I think a good portion of them will believe her, but I also think a good portion of them will not. And for defense, that's at least a hung jury, and that's winning in some sense.
Bernarda, some of the texts, she was affectionate towards Combs, she's positive towards him. Does that hurt the prosecution's case?
So it's explained. It's explained in the sense that you already heard from Dr. Hughes, where she gave testimony, provided testimony as to a couple can be lovey-dovey. It's not to say that they're never on good terms, that the person doesn't love that person. However, it's that same love and that lovey-dovey that keeps that person coming back even after they've been abused a few times or multiple times. So also you have to remember the prosecution already got the text messages that they needed in terms of the ones that corroborate of her, the sex trafficking and engaging in these sexual acts and how she felt, but more importantly, how she told Combs multiple times that she no longer wanted to participate in these hotel nights. So now you have the tale of two cities, right? You have the defense with their hours and hours and hours and hours of text messages, and you have the text messages from the prosecution, but the prosecution was able to color those text messages with giving more insight as to what the relationship really was.
At one point today, Brian, Jane testified there was this 2-month stretch where there was no hotel nights. Why does that matter?
I think the defense is trying to make an argument, and I know Dr. Hughes and Bernard are going to push back on this, that there were times where if she said she didn't want to, he said you don't have to. And there are multiple times where an entertainer or a sex worker would show up and she says, I'm not feeling it. I'm not attracted to this person. They don't smell good. And Sean Combs, even though I think that the key word here was agitated, that he be agitated by it, he still provide the contraceptive. He still said you don't have to sleep with this person. He said, okay, we don't have to do hotel nights for this time. And I think the argument here from the defense is, he's not coercing you. He's not forcing you.
But you had that one instance where she said, oh, I'm not attracted to this specific entertainer. But then he had another one. It was like on rotation. Hold up, I got another one for you. But
who was the next one? The next one was Paul. The next one was Cabral. The people that she was close with, that she was attracted to it. And so I think, I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm merely presenting the defense's argument of, he understands his lady doesn't like one thing, even though he's trying to explore this in his sexuality. And he said, okay, if the issue is the person, I will find the person that you do like.
But this is the problem that the defense is encountering with that, Eva, that sure, you're going after the sex trafficking and be like, well, I didn't want to do it with that escort or that entertainer. And Sean Combs was like, okay, I'll get you another one. While you're fighting the sex trafficking, by you bringing that testimony in, you're doing yourself in on the third count of the transportation to engage in prostitution, because there's no arguing or dispute that these entertainers were getting paid in exchange for sex.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the defense's argument of Sean Combs is merely inviting these entertainers or people from Cowboys for Angels or wherever it is just for their time, so you can hang out. That, I think, is a foregone conclusion in terms of that charge, but that is a sentence of up to 10 years. You eat the lesser charge to try to beat the higher one. It's what we do as attorneys all the time.
Mm-hmm. Some of the details that we were hearing today, though, Bernard, I have to ask you about this, buying matching shorts for...
Oh, my God. There was some smirks in the courtroom because when yes, that's exactly what I did, yes.
Drinking your water over there.
Yes, Eva, we looked at each other in the courtroom when we heard that, because that was something that none of us had heard before, not in opening statements or not through the testimony of Cassie. So, yes. So, Jane stated that when she would go to the lingerie store, the sex store, that she came up with the idea of buying matching shorts, one for Sean Combs and one for the entertainer, because she said that sometimes when the entertainers would come, they would come with a different type of shorts and it wasn't attractive to her. So she thought she would speed up the process of ending this sex night, this hotel night, if she provided clothing, these new shorts, that will attract her more and make time go by faster to get to the conclusion of that night.
And when that came out, we were all kind of looking at each other, all kind of like
what kind of shorts?
Give us more details. But I think for the defense, they're trying to say, okay, we understand if you're in this relationship and you're arguing that you're controlled, you're forced to do this. Why are you Googling what a different, I don't want to say the word, my mother watches this, what it is
Your mother watches.
when a man watches his partner having intercourse with another person and enjoys that concept? Why are you looking up that 4-letter word to what that is? Why are you buying matching garments?
Well, she was trying to understand her man. Like, why are you having me? How do you get pleasure out of seeing me, not me, Jane, engaging in sex with a complete stranger? She was trying to understand his mindset because she had not been introduced to that prior to engaging in this type of act with Sean Combs.
I think the argument is, at least for the defense, is that you don't try to understand the sexual proclivities of your trafficker. You try to do that for the man that you love. And if the closer that you can make this relationship seem like a consensual one, the more people are going to say, I identify with those concepts, trying to understand what my partner likes. I'm not being trafficked, so she must not be trafficked. And the more they can provide that information, the more they pull this away from a sex trafficking case.
A lot of us have had to Google some things recently to understand some of the words that have been used in this case. Thank you guys both, Brian and Bernarda, for being here. Coming up, rap rivalries have also had a role both inside and outside the courtroom. We'll get into all of that after the break. Welcome back to ABC News Live. The Sean Diddy Combs trial has been filled with some big celebrity names: 50 Cent, Suge Knight, Kid Cudi, and we've heard mention of some long-standing rivalries. To dig deeper into the root of those rivalries, we have ABC News contributor and Sirius XM radio host Mike Muse. Thanks, Mike, for being with us. Okay, let's start with rapper 50 Cent. He's been mentioned multiple times in court, and let's be real, 50 has been all over social media throughout this trial. At one point, even saying he would go to President Trump to stop a pardon if it came to that. What happened between these two?
Yeah, 50 Cent has emerged as one of social media's biggest antagonizers across all topics, subject matters, and people. Their beef goes back to 2001. Eva, you have to remember, a lot of us are looking at Sean Combs of who he is today in this moment, but we have to go back to the early 2000s, 2001, 2002, when Sean Combs, then really known as Puff Daddy or Diddy, was on top of the world. He was one of the biggest megastars out there, and he was an easy draw for people to attack. 50 Cent in early 2001 acknowledged that he helped to ghostwrite one of Puff's lyrics that he had on an album. And then they began to just trade shots and antagonistic claims from 50 Cent, even going up into leading up to the both were competitors with their vodka. With at the time, Diddy had Ciroc, while 50 Cent had his vodka line, Effin' Vodka. So there was rivalry with the vodka and the spirits. There was rivalry within the music. But then also, too, there seemed to be some jockeying over former Bad Boy artist Mace. Mace publicly wanted out of his contract with Bad Boy. At the time, 50 Cent wanted to buy him out of his contract, which added more to the antagonistic nature of those two individuals.
So a lot there. Okay, we have to also talk about Suge Knight. His name has been mentioned in this trial at least 50 times so far. Combs' former assistant, David James, testified that he once spotted Knight at Mel's Diner in L.A. and then was forced to go with Combs, who he said was armed, to confront him. How did these two become rivals?
Again, it goes back to that part now into the mid-1990s, right, when you started to see the East Coast and West Coast rivalry really began to reach its peak. And from the West Coast, Suge Knight was the pinnacle of and the face of West Coast rap, right? He had Death Row Records, where he had an incredible roster, including the face of West Coast rap, which was Tupac Shakur. On the East Coast, Diddy had arisen to become, in his record label, Bad Boy, the face of the East Coast in terms of record label and business moguls, opposite Suge Knight. But Diddy had Big Notorious B.I.G., Biggie Smalls, signed to his label, and he was the face of East Coast rap. So that's when you began to see two music titans, Suge Knight and Diddy, really having this rivalry from a business perspective. And that's when you saw the rivalry between the two rappers of Tupac and Biggie, also too, going at each other from different coasts. So that was the impetus of that. So that has to go back into the mid-1990s to late 1990s.
Mike Muse, you've been teaching me about diss tracks for quite some time now. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you, Eva.
And thank you for joining us. We'll be back back with new episodes every day of the trial. The show streams right here on ABC News Live, Disney Plus, and Hulu weekdays at 5:30 p.m. Eastern and Pacific. For even more on the Diddy trial, make sure to follow our podcast, Bad Rap, The Case Against Diddy, hosted by our very own Brian Buckmeyer on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. I'm Eva Pilgrim in New York. Have a good rest of your day.